Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue with our study of Sefer Mishlei, the book of Proverbs. We are about to study chapter 17 together. This chapter will focus on our lives, interpersonal relationships, not as much focused on our relationship with God, although obviously, as we'll see, they're very closely related, and the themes are not really adhered to so perfectly by Solomon. So let's get to it. So tov pas chareva v'shalva ba. It is better a piece of dry bread and have peace when eating that bread. Mibayis male zivcherev, from a house that is full of zivachim, which in this context means meat. And plentiful fat meat, rib, which is full of strife and disagreement. In other words, it is much better to go to have a simple meal, to have simple things in a peaceful home, than to have all of the great luxuries that meat represents, but a house full of strife. An experience many of us have probably noticed in our lives, that having it all doesn't necessarily mean you have a peaceful house and home and family full of love. And not having it all and not being wealthy doesn't mean you're not happy. In fact, often the opposite is the case. Eved maskil, a smart or intelligent, or maskil really means a skilled servant. Yimshol bevein mevish, will rule over, will take precedence over a son who is mevish. Literally means who is embarrassing, meaning he's just incompetent. He can't get anything done. He doesn't do anything. In other words, a master, even a father, will elevate his servant who is smart and capable and skilled over one who is a son. This is kind of a statement against nepotism, that if you have a person who truly wants a success for his family, for his company, for whatever enterprise he's running, you can hire your children, but if they're incompetent, it would be better to hire a someone who's not related, a servant, who's much more competent, who does a better job, and eventually that's what's going to happen. So it's better to be good at what you do. And even a servant who starts off that way eventually will divide up the inheritance together with the brothers, if he achieves that level. Matzreif la kesef v'kur la zohav. And in this verse, this is verse 3, is really the way I kind of understand this is a person can purify silver, right, in a matzreif, which is a place where it's a instrument, a utensil within which silver is melted down and the impurities are removed. V'kur la zohav, and a kur is also like a furnace, right, within which gold is melted down, also and purified. So a person can purify, can take out the impurities and the bad parts of things, like even valuable things like silver and gold. However, within a person's heart, no one can know, no one can tell, no one can test it, no one can try it, right? But God is the only one who searches within our hearts, the only one who knows the impurities within our hearts, the only one who knows what's good, what's bad within the hearts of human beings is God himself. Meira makshiv al sfas oven. A person who's trying to do bad, an evil person, is constantly listening to the evil speech. He's always listening to what nonsense is being said, what lies are being told, what rumors are being said about people, because he uses that information to hurt others and try to bring gain to himself. Sheker mazin al lishon havos. A person who lies is constantly listening to malicious speech. The bad people are the ones that are sitting in the back telling bad stories about others. That's an observation about society that has been true then is true today and will likely be true, unfortunately, forever. Verse 5, lo'eg lo rush. The worst thing a person can be is a lo'eg lo rush, a person who makes fun of he who is poor. In other words, beating someone when he or she is down. Such a person, cheref osehu, he is blaspheming the one who created him. We are all children of God. We are all created by the same God. Just because at a given time or place, this person or you might be more successful than they, you might be more healthy than they, you might be, have things that they don't have. But to make fun of someone who is down, that is someone who is blaspheming God Himself. The right thing to do, of course, is to help uplift that person. You're not better than them. We're all children of God. Sameach le'ed lo yinakeh. The worst person is a person who is happy when his friend has a downfall. When someone else has misfortune, such a person, lo yinakeh, will never be forgiven, will never be cleansed. Ateret zikenim b'nei banim. What is the crown of the person in his old age? An elder is b'nei banim, are his grandchildren, his descendants that are continuing in his good path in life. V'tiferes banim avosam, and the opposite is true as well. The glory and the pride of children are their parents. How wonderful it is when a person can be proud of his or her parents and what they've achieved in life, and how wonderful it is when a parent can be proud over what their children have achieved in life. Lo naval in naval svas yeser. And this is verse 7. And there's various ways of translating this. And I kind of got a hint from Evan Ezra as to how I want to translate this verse. And I think that what this means is most of the translations have this, that it is that it's referring to the naval, the bad person, the what's a good translation for naval? A dishonest, boorish person is a naval. So it's not nice for a naval to speak lofty, special words. In other words, when you listen to a bore stand up and speak eloquently, it just sounds stupid, right? This is the simple and what most commentaries and translators understand it. Afkilin adiv svas shaker, and it's also inappropriate, even more inappropriate for an adiv, for a generous person, to speak lies. I'm not sure how to put my finger on it, but something that bothers me about the standard way to understand this verse led me to look at the commentaries again to see if there's another way to read this. And I really liked what I saw in the Evan Ezra, who seems to hint that it's not talking about the naval or the nadiv, the boorish person, the dishonest person, or the generous person speaking themselves. It's talking about us speaking about them. So when it says lo naval, it is not nice to speak flattering words about a person who is truly a bore, a person who is truly a dishonest and selfish person. It's basically what we would call, just plain out flattery, right? To do that kind of speech, that is not nice. So it is not nice to speak excessive words of praise over a person who doesn't deserve it. Afkilin adiv, and even more so, it is worse when there's a good person, to speak badly about them in order to get some sort of a gain. So it's important when we speak about people to be honest, praise the people who deserve praise, and criticize those who deserve criticism. Verse 8. Evan Chain. I just want to say about my interpretation of 7. You have to look at the Evan Ezra. I'm kind of getting a little hint from his words that this is one way he understood this verse. But either way, that's how I want to translate it, and we talked about it already. So verse 8, Evan Chain, the word Evan Chain means literally a precious stone, a stone that is So it's something that people desire. Hashochad be'eni balav. That is what bribery is to he who commits bribery, who does bribery. Exactly what this verse means, I'm going to explain in a minute, but first let me translate. El kol asher yifnei yaskil. No matter where he turns, he will be successful. So one way is understanding this bribery as not being bribery in the bad sense, but as being the things that we do in order to influence others. And Rashi understands this as the things that we do in order to influence God. In other words, we ask God for forgiveness and we act well, we do things for Him, so to speak, the things that He wants us to do in order to be successful in life. It's a beautiful interpretation, but it doesn't seem like the simple meaning of the words. Another way of understanding the Ralbag at Gersonides, he understands this verse to mean exactly what it's talking about, bribery, and it's really talking about something negative, not something positive. In other words, the shochad, bribery, if a person gets into the habit of using bribery to get what he wants, then that trick becomes like a precious stone. That's how he buys things. That's how he gets his way around the world, right? Maneuvers his way by bribing people, and he will be successful getting along that way. It's not a good thing. It's just human nature. We can buy our way through things. It's not advising us to live this way. It's a statement about human nature. The another way to understand is that if you look at the Mitzudos, he understands that, and the Malbim also understands that the Ba'alav, the owner of the bribe, is not talking about the person doing the bribing, but it's talking about the person receiving the bribe. So Even Chen Hashochad Be'eni Ba'alav, right? The one who receives bribery, one who is bribed by someone, he looks at that bribe that he's receiving as if it was a precious stone. And El Kol Asher Yifne, and wherever he turns, wherever he looks at the person who gave him the bribe, right, he's constantly justifying him, right? He's constantly justifying the one who gave him the gift. And of course, the Malbim understands this to be referring to a judge himself, right? A judge who receives a bribe, no matter how hard he tries, he's always going to look for a way to justify and acquit the person who's in front of him who gave him the bribe. So those are different ways of understanding verse 8. You can choose which one is closest to your heart. I like the Mitzudos that we mentioned, but either way, they're all beautiful. Mechase pesha mevakesh ava. If someone is searching love, if someone is searching a good relationship with someone, he overlooks negligence, he overlooks faults. And this could be taken both in a good way and in a bad way. When one when one loves someone, one can accept their behavior and say, I understand why he did this, why she did that. You're seeking a good relationship and you're more forgiving, right, and more patient with them. It could also be a bad thing, right? Machase pesha, you overlook faults and then problems don't get fixed, and eventually they could build up to a place where it can cause a significant rift. V'shoneh b'davar mafrid alof. The person who constantly brings things up, he is the one that breaks up friendships. He never forgives, constantly bringing up, remember when you did this, remember when you did that. A person who's always, as like they say in Yiddish, hafbroiges, who always constantly bears a grudge, constantly brings up the same story in order to not to hold it against someone, never forgiving. So to create love and relationships, mechase pesha, we should be willing to overlook the faults of our friends, of those we want to build loving relationships with, and stop bringing up the same old nonsense, and so on. Tachas geora b'mevin, I'm sorry, techas. I read that wrong. I wasn't wearing my reading glasses, but techas geora b'mevin. It's a interesting word here, the way it's being used, but the effect, right, of a geara, of a rebuke. Geara means like to yell at someone. It could mean it in a bad way, but here it means it in a positive way. A rebuke is for someone who understands, who takes it, a rebuke that's honestly given is more influential. Mehakos ksil mea, from whacking a fool 100 times. A person who is a fool doesn't want to learn, doesn't want to improve, doesn't want to get better. You can bop him over the head 100 times and he won't figure it out. He won't get the lesson. He won't improve. But a maven, a person who understands, a person who's intelligent, one criticism, he or she will take it to heart and become a better person. Ach miri yivakesh ra. Verse 11, an evil person will always be looking, right, to rebel. He'll always be looking for a way to poke and prod and cause strife and cause arguments and make things worse. So an evil person is always looking for ways to stir the pot and mess things up. Umalach achzori yeshulach bo. And the kind of people that he's going to associate with, it's only a matter of time until a messenger of cruelty will come against him. In other words, if that's the kind of life you lead, constantly stirring up strife, constantly stirring up arguments, at some point it's going to come back against you. It's going to come back to haunt you. Verse 12 is another famous verse. Pagosh dov shakul ba'ish, right? It is, I would rather meet a bear, a mother bear who lost her cubs, right? And not to meet a fool who is involved in his foolishness. A foolish person who is involved in his foolishness and his nonsense is way more dangerous than a mother bear looking for her babies, which is pretty dangerous. Meishivra tachastova, someone who exchanges bad for good. In other words, someone does you a favor, and you, instead of thank him or her, instead of praise them, instead of buying them a gift, instead of being appreciative, you answer them and respond to them with evil, with bad. Right? Somebody does you a favor and you treat them poorly. Lo tamashra mi beso. Such a person will always have evil in his house. It's just a general observation, which of course makes sense socially. If you're the kind of person that never shows appreciation for favors, no one's going to do you a favor, no one's going to help you, and all you're going to have in your home is evil. Verse 14, and I'm going to stop after verse 14 because it's about halfway through this chapter. Poter mayim reshis madon. One who begins a fight is like someone who opens a dam, opens a sluice, and lets the water come out. Once the water comes flowing out, you can't stop it. The flood downstream is going to happen. There's no way to rush and stop the water. Water behind a dam just is nice. It's in a controlled place. You open the door, there's no control left. When you start a fight, it's the same thing. And there's peace, people are getting along, the situation is controlled, the situation is calm, everything is great. You start the fight, there's no way to stop where the arguments, where the fighting, where the damage will be done. It is better to leave or to step away from the fight before the fight begins. In other words, it's much better to prevent the fight from happening in the first place than to try to, and much easier to do that than to try to stop a fight once it starts. Once the blows start falling and the punches start flying, it's very hard to make peace. It's much easier to prevent it in the first place. So this then would be the first half of chapter 17. Thank you so much for studying this together with me. I really appreciate all of you who participate. Feel free to comment. You can also send me an email at weinrebsaul, that's WEINREBSAUL @gmail.com. I'll do my best to respond to comments, suggestions, interesting observations, whatever it is that you want to say or talk about. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.